Namaste. Assalamu alaikum. Shalom. Ni hao. Buenos dias. Hesiche. Aquaba. Welcoming. What up, though? This is Cafe Melange. Week numero 10. Session numero 4. Hectic week this week. Um, Lightweight exhausting. No session dos this week. No session tres this week. Dos and tres. Dos was a Upasada day, so no session planned for that one. Full moon. And then yesterday, I had a meeting on another side of town. 2 hours to get there, 2 hours back. Didn't make it back in time, and just called it, chalked it up. So that's a my bad, but it's a little better I can do accordingly, and still be doing the do. That being said, there are updates and there's progression and there's building, but this ain't the day for getting into all that. It's story day, story time. Before we do that, I will share, I haven't been doing these joints, so I plan to do that. And then also, the discussion joints that we've been having, we're transforming it or evolving it into these joints. So the same kind of thing, but that might be topic for another conversation. I just give that as the FYI for those who care and for those who are actually on these joints. So that being said, we get into the story time. So the story, we're actually doing a trifecta today. The stories are from the What Are You book, the compilation of profiles and interviews or gotta turn this joint on. Interviews, profiles, personal essays or testimonies is one way to call it, from young mixed people about 20 years ago, about being mixed. So that's where story time is coming from today. Now, it's actually, like I said, a trifecta. 3 stories. And they're brief. So, Pearl Fuyo Gaskins. That's where she is. Alright. So, I saw one story. I had a mind of the type of story to share. And when I was like thumbing through the pages to find such a story, I saw this one brother. I was like, that's interesting. Oh, I know I did it. All right. I was going to have a little bit of a show and tell today. I might have to include that as a part dos for today's session. Yeah, it's going to be a part dos. Anyways, I saw his profile and I just saw like his background, his heritage listing, and I said, you know what? We need to represent that sooner than later. So I looked ahead, and then I looked at the photo before his, the profile before his, and interesting. That's a notable person in the mixed movement. And then I looked at the profile before that person, and I said, you know what? This is a nice trifecta. So we are going to begin with the latter, the latticed, the latter of the 3, which is this sister. This reverse thing is challenging. So there it is. How you doing, Uncle? All right. Staying steady, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
I hear you. All right. So this sister's name is Nicole Rivera, and back in that day, she's 17, from Bayshore, New York, in the Haudenosaunee land. Her more is of African ancestry, African American listed here, and her far is Puerto Rican. So this is what she says. Oh yeah, also disclaimer, I haven't read all these all the way through. I just read the first beginning, and I've read the book a number of years ago, so I can't say exactly what may be said here, so I just share that as information. Here we go. When I was in second grade, this little boy, he was Argentinian, invited me to his birthday party. I went and I had fun, and my mom came to pick me up. Well, the next day in school, he goes, I would have never invited you to my birthday party if I had known you were black. And I punched him. I couldn't imagine that coming out of somebody's mouth who is that small. His parents must have said something. I don't have the same skin color as my Moore. She has darker skin. When I go to the store with her, the salesperson will go, are you together? Or next? My dad is light skinned, so my friends always ask me, is your dad white? My hair throws people off too. People are always looking at my hair trying to figure out what the hell I am. I have truly thick black hair. I utilize black hair products and I only go to black hairdressers. People are always like, wait a minute, she's light skinned, but look at her hair. I get mad because people are always trying to categorize me. People try to figure me out like I'm some puzzle. That's truly annoying. I can understand that people are curious, but they ask me questions all the time. Why can't they leave me alone? I am what I am. I truly respect the people who get to know me first and ask me later. But the people who come up to me and say, what are you? I have no clue why they want to know. There's a group of black girls at my high school and they'll always make snide comments to me. They'll go, what are you? Are you white and black? Are you Indian? Just the way they ask is obnoxious too. It's kind of like, what are you? You alien? They're poking and probing. Sometimes they're like, look at that black girl trying to act white. Or look at that Puerto Rican girl trying to act black. Her boyfriend is black. And sometimes when I call down the hall with him, walk down the hall with him, they say, why is he going out with that white girl? Or why is he going out with that Puerto Rican girl? Maybe he's going out with me because he likes me. It's tough speaking in the first person. I'm going to stick with it though. You learn to brush it off because people are just ignorant. Ignorance is fear of the unknown. If you're ignorant about something, then you're scared of it. Well, I'm not scared of Latino people and I'm not scared of black people. I feel lucky to know both sides. I am further open-minded individual because of that. I have friends who are white and I have friends who are Puerto Rican, friends from Colombia, friends who are black. I'm lucky because I have two cultures instead of just one. My dad never taught me Spanish, but I hang out with my friends who are Puerto Rican and I pick up things from them. And I listen to salsa and merengue. And I listen to R&B and rap. I eat Hispanic food and I listen to Spanish radio station. But at the same time, being both has kind of made me self-conscious. People see me in so many different ways. I'm never sure if people are treating me a certain way because of what I look like or because of who I am. Something will happen and I'll be like, is this a racial thing? Or is it just because they don't like me? I'll say to my boyfriend, why are people staring at me, trying to figure out what I am? He'll say, how do you know they're not just saying, oh, wow, that's a nice shirt, or I like her hair? Sometimes I think he's right, but I feel like I'm not understood sometimes. He's trying to understand, but you can't understand unless you've experienced it. People are ignorant, maybe eventually they'll learn, when everyone is the same shade of gray. So, again, that is Sister Nicole. Speaking in the first person of women, that's tough, particularly for a dude like myself. I'm still working on deliberating on that delivery. So for the moment, I'm gonna keep continuing it, but it's tough. It's tough. And cats who side with LGBTQ and liberal cats can't convince me one way or the other, because there's less credibility coming from that perspective. So, like I said, I have to work on it further. Because the thing is this: if I have difficulty speaking the first person when she's speaking about her boyfriend, and additionally, then do I have difficulty speaking in the first person of another dude who's talking about his wife or his another member of his family or whatever. So if I'm going to personalize it to that degree or be that conscientious or conscious about it, does that categorically hold? So that's tough. It's tough. And then, to be honest, where I go to, my go-to thing is religious holy scriptures and what the protocols are. And there are occasions, particularly I can think generally, I can generally call in the Quran and in the Torah, and actually also in the Gospels as well. There being narratives that are speaking in the first person from the perspective of a woman. So that's one of its precedents. How are you doing?
Good.
All right.
Good to see you.
It's nice to see you as well. How's everything going?
Good.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that, Daryl. So, anyways, now, to be honest, obviously that's one of the things I take from it, and it has little to do with what she says. The content of what she says is just the rhetoric or the process. So, anyways, addressing her content, I think it's a lot of the standard kind of thing about identity and people's perspective and opinions. This is coming from a 17-year-old, and so it's still a somewhat early stage of life, and I think there's still a certain. And to be honest, I wasn't having that type of conversation or articulating my experience like that when I was that age. I was just fitting in and staying under the radar. So I respect that, but I also recognize that having matured since that age, things become we gain a deeper insight into things. We get past like the surface level annoyances into like the entrenchments of society, family, community, allegiances, things along those lines, because that's where a lot of those questions are coming from. That's what children are asking. That's what students are asking. That's why students are asking, what are you, this, and the other, because they want to know how to process the people around them, because that's what their elders teach, and additionally. And so those questions are coming from that influence and that guidance and those teachings from each one's own respective tradition and community. So, and then once the answer is given, European, African, Latino, Asian, Native, Middle Eastern, then people know, okay, then the invitations to the birthdays come around, or invitations to the group, or study, or sports teams, or whatever else. The socialization, they know how to approach the socialization kind of thing once they know how to identify people. So when we mature in life, become young adults and older adults, we begin to better witness and understand and recognize the entrenchments and the decisions that are made. Who gets scholarships? Who gets admitted to this? Who gets invited to the cotillion or the quinceañera or graduation or whatever else? Who gets invited to like the rites of passages within communities? Because it's a matter of like allegiances through life. So it gets serious. So it's other than just like having friends and just like socializing. Oh, that person's fun and I like them. Yeah, we like the same kind of music. Yeah, music is important, but adults, parents, elders, leaders within communities know that the social relationships are increasingly serious and purposeful. And it's not just a matter of having fun, but okay, who are you having fun with? And what are you doing? And who do we know about from their life? Who are their parents? Where are they from? What language do they speak? This and the other. So, anyways, as melange people, the consideration is being knowledgeable respectively of our own respective traditions, our own respective heritages and language. She mentions that in here. learning Espanol in a certain way, and maintaining her roots of African ancestry and Iberian ancestry, uh, Puerto Rico, and additionally, but also being increasingly established, you can call it entrenched within our Mélanger identity and our Mélanger heritage as a premise for cooperating with others and building social relationships with others. So that's part of the consideration and mindfulness. So that's the story. Now, next one. How you doing, there? Hey, Jeff. So this next story is from Jennifer Chow. Now this is a throwback because she's 20 in this joint. And this was made a few years, I'm imagining, probably before she graduated from university. But when she's in her mid 20s, she starts a mixed group called Swirl, which this is, like I said, about 18 years ago. So it was one of the few groups I was around. So that was a big thing, particularly nearly 20 years ago. And it was basically a social group. It was like light-hearted, kind of just like socializing, have dinners and social gatherings and stuff like that. Again, for young 20-somethings, and that's something a lot of communities have, young professional groups and stuff like that. But this was like a social group, and so she did some promotional stuff on it. This is before YouTube was around proper, but she did some stuff. There was a website up, swirlinc.com, I think, or swirlinc.org is actually, and it might still actually be up, I don't know. But she was doing that for a few years, and it was popular enough where there were a few chapters around this continent. She was based in the New York area, again, Haudenosaunee, but I think there were chapters. I think I recall one specifically being in the Miami area, Miami, Florida, the land of the Seminole. And then one, I think, in Seattle, in the Pacific Northwest, and a few others additionally. Maybe one in Houston, maybe one in SoCal, the land of the... I got a lot of native brethren in my mind at the moment. Oleon, I'll go with. So, anyways, it gets popular. And she does that for a number of years. And then after that, that's big thing already. That's big time in the Mélanger joint already nearly 20 years ago. But then beyond that, then she and another sister, Carmen Van Kerkhove, established a YouTube thing a number of years later. And it was first called Addicted to Race. It was a podcast. And it was called Addicted to Race. And there are a number of episodes there where they talk about being mixed. And then they actually were doing like seminars and consultations to businesses and diversity kind of training stuff. And then the podcast got kind of like morphed or transformed into this thing called Racialicious. And I guess it had a popular following amongst mixed people, but also additional people, because it provided itself, or it lent itself as a forum for mixed people specifically, but also for multiculturalism. So inclusive of people of different cultures. I was supposed to share this after her narrative. So anyways, it is what it is. So that goes on for a while, and it gets popular. But then Carmen Van Kerkhove gets married, has a kid, and gets busy with that. And Jen Chow Fontan gets married. That's her married name. And she gets busy with that. So the Addicted to Race consultations and stuff like that kind of go on the wayside. And then the Racialicious, they actually sold it to another group that wasn't next. I don't think they were actually mixed. They were like a multicultural group. And that's not to down. That's not to share. I'm just saying a multicultural group. Because I guess Racialicious had like a brand name by that point. So they sold it to that group, and then the group continued on with it. I guess for a few episodes. I stopped kind of listening to it after a while. At that point, and the uploads were kind of intermittent by that point. So, anyways, that's part of the story. So it's still part of the lore, the folklore of the Mélanger movement and the Mélanger diaspora community, and additionally, so it's I actually saw this book. I saw her in this book about the time when they were doing the Addicted to Race joint. I was like, haha, there she is. So, anyways. It's been a while since I read this bio, but as you can see, it's comparatively brief. So here we go. First person again. Jennifer Chow. Oh, I didn't read the subject title for Nicole's thing. So it was basically, why are people staring at me? So the title heading for Jennifer Chow's joint is, I'm just an object to people. So here's what she says. Jennifer Chow, 20, from Queens, New York, in the land of Hunter Sunny. Her more is Jewish European American. Her far is Chinese American. So here it is. All of my experience as a biracial woman has been based on appearance. People ask me what I am before they ask me what my name is. When I first meet somebody, we'll be talking and they'll be staring at my face and not truly listening to what I'm saying. And then finally, so what are you? That question always pops up. It disturbs me when people are further interested in that than in what I'm saying or what I'm thinking. And people always have this assumption that all biracial people are beautiful and that's the best thing about us. People say, oh, I wish I was biracial because biracial people are the most beautiful people. Biracial people are just truly objectified, you know? I see that happening constantly to my biracial friends. Just so much focus on the physical. You're just a shell, there's nothing inside. People don't try to find out what's inside. They're just concerned with the outside because it's so mystical and mysterious. It's frustrating to think of so many people looking at you and that's all you are to them. Just something to look at. It's very dehumanizing. I'm just an object to people. I'm not a person. I have no feelings. I have no thoughts. I'm just an object, basically. That's how many people make me feel. So that's the bio. And this is something actually that's communicated frequently amongst mixed brethren, which is the objectification. I think particularly amongst mixed sisters, there's that exotification. There is that kind of like men tend to be very crude or base when perceiving women and have a certain idea of what they want. Well, first of all, there's the sexual conquest thing, and so a mixed woman being a further notches on that conquest belt. And obviously that's wrong, but I'm just speaking what the actuality is. But then even when it's a prospect of marriage, there is also that exotic objectification tendency as well. People can accuse me of that myself. That's another conversation. So again, amongst mixed sisters, that's a very widespread gripe or frustration. Amongst mixed brothers, I don't think there's much of a complaint. I know there's some that talk about it, but in terms of like on the list of priorities of what's most frustrating, I think it bothers the brothers less, at least in a direct personal sense. Maybe it bothers brothers on the behalf of the sisters, but I think brothers don't mind being looked at as a kind of like attractive or this, that, and the other. I just think in general it bothers dudes less than it bothers women. So I think for men it's a matter of being marginalized in terms of like social prospects or intellect or social or societal influence, of being perceived as just like politically impotent, of not having weight and things like that. And so I think that's what concerns dudes further, and it may be articulated in terms of identity politics or otherwise, but I think that's something that frustrates mixed brothers further than just being objectified, and particularly because a lot of mixed brothers are also on some chauvinist, self-indulgent, sexual exploitive BS too. So they're like, oh, that she just wants me for this and the other. Haha, cool. Um, so, anyways, that's just some considerations from that. I'm looking at the volume registry and it's actually rather high. It doesn't feel very windy, but it's going up and down. So I'm uncertain how the audio is going on this joint. And I need to. I'll check it. I'll check it later. So, anyways, now on the thing about being objectified. I think one of the remedies, to be honest about that, one of the remedies to that is to be further proactive and effective in establishing melange as a thing. To be increasingly definitive and tangible in our melange identity and experience and culture and community. So, right off the bat, when people see somebody who's ethnically ambiguous, they say, oh, they're mixed. And then they have some kind of frame of reference of like what it means to be mixed. So they're less pressed to like narrow somebody to identify what their actual specific ethnic heritage is. So by that I mean saying, okay, that person's mixed. So what do I know about the mixed community? Oh, here's some notable mixed people, celebrities, historic figures, renowned figures. Here's some principles about being mixed, some experiences. Here's some stories, some books, some movies, some films that talk about the experience. Okay, that's where that person's coming from. All right, I don't have to hound them about like saying what they are specifically or what they are definitively or whatever. I don't even have to ask them anything along those lines. I just gather, just like if somebody's looking at somebody who's black, they can't pinpoint everything about that person's experience just because they're persons of African ancestry very visibly and obviously, or persons of European ancestry or Latino or Asian or whatever else. But at least they know enough to have some frame of reference to say, okay, I know what that people's about. For better or worse or whatever else, they have a certain knowledge rather than just being oblivious and saying, oh, yeah, mixed, but who do you identify with, and this and the other. When people better recognize mixed as a thing, legit, and like even if they don't agree with it, even if they don't like it or whatever else, once they at least know about it, then there's less pressure, there's less pressing on individuals to be like give their pedigree about what their blood quantum and blood lineage is. So that's something for melange people to think about and being proactive in establishing melange as a categorical identity. So that's what I've got to say about that. So continue on to the next joint. So this is the first joint that I saw and what sparked it off. It's also the longest joint. What's going on, bro? You got your coat open like there ain't snow on the ground.
I'm sweating.
I hear you. It's hot?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was in March. I said, I'm sweating. I got to
I hear you.
And I just worked.
I hear you. All right, bro. So, all right. Here we go. I got to work on the brother's name, too. So, the brother is Tyonek Oge Mageshig. He's 24 from Tohola, Washington. And his mother is European American and Mexicana. And his father is Native American. And the title heading of this is "The color of my skin is not the color of my heart." Haha, interesting. Here we go. Tyonek says, I've been on the Quinault Indian Reservation since I was in 8th grade. It's on the Olympic Peninsula in the northwest part of Washington State. Before that, we lived on Flathead Indian Reservation in western Montana. I've actually lived all my life on reservations. It's a different mentality than living in a city or living in a white community. That Indian thing is always there, the Indian beliefs. My mom is half white and half Mexicana. My dad's family was originally from White Earth Reservation, a small reservation in north central Minnesota. They are enrolled members of the Pembina band of the Minnesota Chippewa tribe. My dad had a truly hard time when he was a kid. My grandma had to struggle to keep her family together because she and my grandfather went their separate ways. My dad experienced a lot of racism and he told me stories. He went to a high school that had a lot of white people in it. A couple of the guys would gang up on him and this other Indian. Buenas tardes. A couple of the guys would gang up on him and this other Indian. They'd try and beat them up just because they were Indians. He fought back and kicked their asses. Whatever he has against white people was put into concrete then. Now he has a hard time being around people who aren't Indian. He's in court right now for discrimination against him by his employer. When you work your whole life and people treat you like dirt, it's hard to feel comfortable in the outer world. I had a lot of respect for what he's had to endure. I try to follow his example, stand tall, chin up. He's like a modern Indian warrior. I may be part Mexicano and part white and part Indian, but in my heart I see myself as just Indian. Being mixed has been a pretty big issue in my life, trying to figure out who I am as a person. I'm probably the lightest person in my family. When I was younger I'd say, I don't look Indian, so I guess I'm not. When I was growing up, I'd look at my sister and she'd be so much darker than I was. So I'd think, who am I? I'd look at my dad and he would look truly dark. If he gets out in the soleil, he tans easily. My mom's darker than I am. But I have a hard time even getting a tan. To me, being Indian is about knowing the culture, but in so many ways, it's just how you look at a quick glance. Someone can't look at me and be able to tell I'm Indian. So I have to tell people. At this time in my life, I practically shouted at people. If you're dark or you can get dark, you don't truly have to deal with that. The physicality of not being able to look like who you are. Like when my sister is amongst Indians, she can be accepted just like that. You never have to ask her. Everyone knows she's an Indian. It's obvious. But I have to work at it a little bit. Make an extra effort to get to know them. Indians would be like, oh, brother, I was Indian because I was my brother, not because I was me. In a way, they don't truly accept that I am Indian. They keep me at a distance until I do something that proves that I am, and sometimes I feel like I shouldn't have to do that. What ends up happening is that my worldview comes out in my actions. After they talk to me for a couple of minutes, they can tell I'm Indian because the culture in me comes out, how I feel and how I think and how I see the world. Because my sister is so much darker than I am, she's encountered racist remarks and stuff. I can be right next to her and they're not even directed at me. Once we were on a school bus and these two guys gave my sister a dirty look and said something to each other. So I said, what are you looking at? Leave her alone. To them, she was just an Indian, a drunk, a bitch, a whore. That's all they saw in her. All they knew were labels and stereotypes, not her. In high school, Indians didn't get along with white people. Just because this incident on the bus happened, there had been this huge fight. There was a party at the beach and these Indians showed up. People were talking about it all over school because a lot of truly popular white guys got beat up. Those guys on the bus just protected their feelings and stereotypes about Indians on my sister. Projected. Those guys on the bus just projected their feelings and stereotypes about Indians on my sister. My sister can handle her own stuff. She's a pretty tough cookie. But those views or opinions weren't voiced at me. They were voiced at her. And that made me so mad. I felt like I wasn't truly Indian enough if somebody didn't act racist towards me. I was kind of ashamed that I didn't look further like my sister. And I was ashamed that I didn't look further like how I felt inside. It was a hard thing to deal with. And my dad used to talk to me a lot about it. He would always sit me down and get to the core of what I was feeling and help me try to get over it. He said, you should feel lucky because you can walk in two worlds. That's not a problem. It's a gift and it's a strength. In the long run, it's going to be a power. You will be able to do things that I would never be able to do. He told me this many times. I'd feel proud for a while and then I'd feel ashamed again. I had a hard time making friends at the reservation. I got bused to a high school and most of the people there were white. I had a hard time relating to them too. It seemed like I didn't fit in anywhere. I worked hard in school and I didn't slack off, and I was kind of a nerd, I guess. But I think that a major cause of the anxiety and stress of socializing was that I was mixed and didn't seem to fit in with either group. It made me feel less friendly. I think if I were darker, it would have been easier to fit in. But when I got to be 17, things changed. What my dad told me finally made sense. And ever since then, opening doors or trying to prove myself or doing all this stuff, extra stuff to be accepted doesn't bother me any further. I finally recognize that that's just a part of life. I think people relate to other people better if they appear to be the same. If you look the same, they'll feel further comfortable about letting you into their world. I don't get scared and I don't get annoyed because I have to do a little bit of extra work. I think it makes me a stronger person. I believe that the harder you work at something, the better you become. I think a person who is mixed always has to work harder to come to terms with who he or she is than somebody who is Indian or somebody who is white. I think that what I had to go through was bad, but it helped me to understand who I am. I asked my dad if I could take my grandfather's name. My name used to be Johnson, and I changed it to Ogamagashig. Johnson is a white name. If people call you Ty Johnson, they don't know you're Indian. But if your name is Ogamagashig, there's no doubt. So people are always like, what kind of name is that? I always have to tell them, this is how you say it. This is what it means. This is what nationality it is. Now my name kind of opens doors for me. I thank my grandfather for that. Changing my name was a way of finally taking that stand. It was kind of a representation of how I felt and who I wanted to be. Before I was ashamed and didn't understand who I was. It's kind of the opposite now. Instead of being ashamed, I'm proud of everything I am. I'm loud and vocal about Indians and Red Power. You've got to be loud and tell people who you are. At the Quinault Indian Reservation, a lot of people look up to me because I'm going to school out east. I'm kind of a role model. There are a lot of people I don't even know who keep track of how I'm doing. There are so many bad things I saw when I was growing up, the poverty, the alcohol and drug problems, things that I want to help improve and make better on the reservations. I knew that to help fix those problems, I had to get an education and come back and work. That gave me my motivation to strive and work hard in my classes. I want to go to law school or maybe teach. My actions, by dedicating my life to school and trying to succeed and work for Indian people, I have made them see that the color of my skin is not the color of my heart. I don't have to prove myself any further. So, that is the brother Tyonek. And I'm putting on my gloves because I've been at this joint for nearly a quarter of an hour, and I'm being mindful because sometimes the computer will shut off unexpectedly, and I have to be careful of that when it gets cold like this. So, a lot of interesting things, and a few things stand out for me personally. The name change is one that stands out personally because I changed my name. And what's interesting for me, particularly, is that I read this, again, nearly 2 decades ago, maybe 15 years ago, before I changed my name. And I had always thought about changing my name even during that period, but not seriously. And probably my dad was still alive when I read this for the first occasion. And obviously changing somebody's name, a dude changing his name is a huge thing in life because dudes don't usually do that. And a dude is saying something, and he's got to be sure about it, and not just saying something, but like he's separating or distancing himself from the name that he's changing from. So now, how did the brother Tyonek get the name Johnson? Maybe his father just took the name Johnson amidst the challenges that he was experiencing. If his father is full-blooded, and his grandfather's name was what he described. I don't have the book at the moment, so I'm not going to pull it up in a moment. But if that's what his grandfather's name is, presumably they had his own father changed his name. Tyonek's father changed his name. So that also reminds me, or I can relate to that because my family name that I'm born with is a legacy of slavery, and that's one of the reasons why I change it. So my far goes throughout his life with that name. It's his father's name and it's his father's father's name, but it comes from his father's slave master. And so I decide in my life, I continue to honor my family, I honor my far, I honor my heritage. I don't honor that name, and I'm not continuing it in further generations and sharing with my wife and sharing with my children. So I'm passing on a different name. So the name that I utilize comes from my far, his first name, John. So Johansson comes from that. But I also got Johansson on my Scandinavian side of my family. So it's honoring my mother's side, my Moor side as well. And then Osisi is from the Igbo tribe, the Igbo language of Nigeria, honoring my Igbo ancestry. And the meaning is tree, and that's actually what my family name, my original family name is. So it's continuing that legacy, continuing that lineage, and but doing it in a liberated way. So that's something that identifies with me. And obviously, again, like he says, somebody's name says a lot about somebody initially. Now he talks about before having that guilty complex about not being ethnic enough or not being native enough. And that's an interesting thing. And he talks about the conversation that he has with his far, and he describes his far, what his far recommends about being mixed and putting that to utilization and making the most of it. I never talked too tough with my far about being mixed. I mean, we would talk about ethnicity and race, but we didn't talk too much about specifically about being mixed. And maybe it's because it was less of a thing of identifying as such. We were hiding from it. We were very candid about race and race relations, and that I was mixed. And he would talk about but I think my far was very similar to Tayonek's far in terms of experiencing a lot of racism in his life, having a lot of anger, and interestingly enough, and perhaps some people might say contradictorily enough, marrying a woman who's of European ancestry. Tayonek's mother more is Mexicana and European, if I recall correctly from the description, which is where he gets his light skin. My more is straight up Scandinavian. So for a man who's a native brother in Tayonek's far's case, and an African or predominantly African, my far is actually mixed, and he was conscientious of that because he has Seminole blood and Israeli and European blood as well. But predominantly, if you look at him, you just say black dude, like straight up dark skinned black dude. So, anyways, I'll say medium dark skinned black because cats get darker than my far. But anyways, he has that same experience of racism in his life and hatred, and he was very candid about talking about it. He says a lot of racist things about European people, and growing up, people are like, wait, Far, you know you're talking about me, right? You know you're talking about my boy, right? But he seemed to be oblivious about that. And in some ways, he seemed to be like protecting me about it, but like by like addressing racism that I was experiencing from Europeans. And so his way of getting back at that was just being racist towards Europeans. He would be racist towards black folk too. So he was equal opportunity. Now he had love for everybody and respect for everybody. And and one of the things I found interesting by far, would tell me growing up, he would repeatedly say how I've got strong genes on both sides of my family. He would speak very favorably and very respectfully and deferentially about my Moore's family, her parents, and her forebears. And so that was something that was very interesting to me. Now we can fault cats for being duplicitous or having contradiction or hypocrisy or whatever you want. Guess what? Everybody got that. And in some ways, people are increasingly, for some people, it's increasingly obvious or it's increasingly noticeable because people have larger interaction with people who are different from oneself. So it comes out further compared to some people who are just encaved or encapsulated or enclosed within a very homogeneous knit circle and don't have a lot of interaction or even talk about people who are different than oneself. So, but when being called to do so, are even that much further duplicitous and contradictory. Anyways, and that might require some further explanation or unpacking, but it's there. So that being said, I that's something that resonates with me from what the brother Tayonek describes. There are a lot of other things as well that come to mind from what he describes, but I'm going to leave it at that. I done spit up 3 stories from the book. And also, something with the book is that a number of the brethren who are featured in the book are featured there in a number of different sections of the book. So there, for some, there's that initial profile where their photograph is included, and then I think particularly Sister Jen Chow is listed or is included in other sections of the book where she gives additional insight, because that looked to be comparatively small compared to what type of insight that I know she has to share, and if I seem to recall her sharing specifically within the book. So that's just as another FYI. One thing I also want to mention, actually 2 things. One, White Earth Reservation. He makes reference of his parents or his father being from White Earth Reservation, and one of the reasons why I highlighted this particular profile is, one, he's mixed native. That's a valuable insight, and actually I have something else to say about that, something further to say about that. But also specifically, his roots come from the White Earth Reservation, and it just so happens that we at our Asona Ashram with Votive Co-op and the Fair Trade Vegan Organic Co-op that we do. We actually do business with White Earth Reservation. By business, we require some of our purchases include Manu Min, the wild rice from the White Earth Reservation, through the company called Native Harvest, which is based on the White Earth Reservation, and the Ojibwe people, which is another word for Chippewa. So, anyways, I saw that, but also the fact that he's mixed native was a narrative to include. That had yet to be like into the mix of these Cafe Mélanger sessions. So now speaking further on that, there's something else on that. Okay. He mentions enrolled, and so I want to address that. But before I address that notion of being what enrolled means. Which is actually important, and it actually is a very nice idea for Mélanger people. Before I get to that, though, what I'll also say is like what I've observed in the mixed experience of Native brethren. So one, I'm native mixed. I am mixed native, but my knowledge, the knowledge of my native knowledge is extremely modest. My politics and my allegiance and activity is very strongly native, but my language skills, my culture skills, my traditional knowledge is extremely modest. So my native cred is modest, and I'm very modest in how I flex that. Now I'm involved with the American Indian movement here in the Cuyahoga area and further, and involved in additional initiatives and projects on the behalf of Native brethren. So I'm active, and by this stage in my life, I continue to learn. But as we age in life, as we mature in life and progress, we get additional responsibilities, and we get called on to share the talents and skills that we have accordingly. So. Anyways, that's excuses. I'm learning, but it's in a modest way. Now, that being said, my point for all that is to say that there are a lot of people who have mixed native blood, that specifically on this continent. Many who recognize it, many who are oblivious to it, many who are very quiet about it, and many who are increasingly conscientious about it. And the mixed native diaspora is a dynamic, just like any mixed diaspora. So there are those like Tayonek who are mixed native, living on the res, and basically assimilating is an accurate word, but it's a little bit have a different connotation. Acclimating or living in a native environment, like he described. Although if he's going to university, I imagine the university might be a conventional mainstream university. So, but anyways, he describes like growing up in a native environment and wanting to be part of the native community. I want to be recognized for that. So that's one way of being mixed native, and that's probably like the most, particularly if his language skills are strong. And he said he has a strong notion of culture. regardless of what his phenotype is in terms of his skin color. Um, that's probably no, nearly the most native on the spectrum of native other that a mixed native gets. What might be further, and it's arguable actually, to be honest, is Métis. And Métis, particularly in the north part of this continent, in the area also known as Canada and the First Nations, Métis is actually an organized community. It's actually a sovereignty. It's actually recognized by the Canadian government. And it's mixed people, mixed native blood, and it's a culture in and of itself. It has a culture, tradition, and linguistic heritage that is distinct from European ancestry or European culture and heritage, and distinct from native culture and heritage. It brings all these on, and it's existed for hundreds of years. So that on the spectrum of being mixed native, Métis and I want to be also clear, being Métis is distinct from being mixed native living on the res. Because living on the res as a mixed native, it's in a native community that identifies as native and being affiliated with that native community. So it's other than claiming one's own specific mixed native community and culture. It's identifying as part of the native culture. So that's a different thing than the Métis. And it's not there's congruences and everything else. It's just different. But those two kind of examples are like on this side of the spectrum when it comes to like the native other kind of thing, and it's a circle, whatever you want to call it. But on the other side is the people who are oblivious to their their native heritage. They don't even know, or if they do know, they just pass for whatever it is, whether it's passing as African and not recognizing the native heritage, or passing as European and not recognizing the native heritage. So that's on the other end of the spectrum. And then towards the middle, cats like myself that do recognize the ancestry, do claim it, but have less knowledge of it. And so there are a lot of mixed brethren along those lines. And to further the dynamic nature of being mixed native is that native brethren, full blood and otherwise, have a diaspora. Many are living on the res, but many, like Brother Tayonek described, many are living in cities and suburbs and rural areas amongst mainstream Europeans or mainstream hood or whatever, Africans or Latinos or whatever else. And it's a different life experience. And that also lends itself to the mixed experience because there's intermarriage and additionally. But there are many native brethren, maybe even full-blooded, who are less knowledgeable culturally or linguistically because they're living in a city or living in a rural area or living in the suburb. So that's part of the experience as well. And that's part of the dynamic nature of being mixed, being native on this land. Now, all that being said, what Brother Tayonek describes is he says that his grandparents are enrolled in the Ojibwe or the Chippewa tribe on White Earth Reservation. The name of the specific tribe that they're enrolled in escapes me at the moment. I fumbled over the name initially, like Pembroke or something like that. Aha. The mobile just shut off. All right. Maybe the battery ran out. So he describes enrolled. Now that's a huge thing. Being enrolled, that means basically being a full-fledged citizen of a native nation. So some might say, what's the benefit of that? What's the point of that? There actually a lot of it's a lot important. One, being enrolled means having rights and having a determination in what happens in the native nations, just like being a citizen of a country, being a citizen of a nation. So that's one of the significant things. But also being recognized and having entitlements to like healthcare, education, social services, and additionally that are particularly when living on the res, but even when living off the res as well. So there are certain rights and duties and benefits that come with being enrolled, and it's a distinguishing factor because cats that ain't enrolled ain't recognized. So it's a matter of like who's officially recognized by the tribe, by the nation. So one of the reasons why it's also increasingly guarded and valued is because there are a lot of native nations that are making bank, that are making money, casino money, and additionally, and so the brethren who are enrolled have a claim to the dividends or the monies, the revenue, the cash that's being made from these casinos, and so because of that, because people have an incentive of being enrolled, even if they don't have legitimate title or connection, there are certain rules and requirements for being recognized, for being enrolled in a native nation. So for Seminole, I've already made effort for this. For Seminole tribe, for example, the requirement is that a person's blood quantum has to be at least 25%, and by that 25%, meaning one's grandparent, and it's a little bit less than little bit less than a blood quantum measurement. It's basically it is a legit kind of heritage-wise. It's basically a parent. No, excuse me, a grandparent. At least one grandparent of a person has to be or an enrolled member of the tribe in order for the grandchild to be qualified to enroll in the tribe. So that's the 25%. So technically, it doesn't have to necessarily even be blood quantum, as long as the grandparent is enrolled. Then the child is enrolled. Now, for people like myself, it's not my grandparent; it's my great grandparent. So I have 12.5%. So again, it's not a blood quantum thing. It's a lineage thing. But so my great grandparent is the one who's full blood Seminole, and but that doesn't qualify for me being enrolled. But particularly because Seminole brethren, particularly in the Florida, they make him bank with the casino outside of Miami. So, anyways, that place. That's part of what enrollment is, and it also speaks to how much a person is involved with the tribe, with the native nation, because again, it gives a person a right for determining the leadership within the community and making decisions within the native nation, and so a person has an additional amount of stake within what the person is with that nation. So there's that. Now, I say that it's an interesting consideration for Mélanger brethren, because that's something for us to consider in terms of organizing and establishing and strengthening the experience of community, establishing this notion of enrollment. The other thing with enrollment for Native people, for the most part, it's not Native nations who set the criteria. It's the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the U.S. government, that determines the qualifications, the requirements for being considered native, because that's the type of stranglehold. Or I'm going to digress from being provocative or militant at the moment, because it's story time. But the stories are told already at this point. We're building from the stories. But basically, the U.S. government is very doctrinal or authoritarian when it comes to governing native nations and saying who can be part of the native nation, who can't be. But anyways, I'm gonna leave that alone for the moment. But for Mélanger brethren, the notion of enrollment is something for consideration in terms of having a buy-in, in the sense of like proactiveness on the part of our populace, because at this point there are a number of organizations and there are a number of people who are in leadership positions who take initiative. But in terms of kind of like the ordinary cats that are the necessary foundation of any community and society, there's less of a commitment, like a formal commitment of like, yo, we're doing this. There might be I'll volunteer for an organization, or I'll attend an event, or I'll contribute to a fundraising campaign or something like that. But in terms of like a long-term or an extended kind of commitment of like, yo, I'm part of this. I can't do a lot for it at the moment. I can't give a lot for the moment, but I'm part of it. There seems to be less of that at the moment. And there's a need for that. So the notion of enrollment is something to consider. And 20 years ago, 20 years ago, there was a political movement for the populace to, um, I don't know if there's actually petitions, but formal petitions, but there was a petitioning or a lobbying from Mélanger groups, organizations, to Mélanger Brethren and the general U.S. population to include or to change the process of the U.S. Census to include multiple categories. And it was successful, and that's the thing now. And it's influential in terms of policy and additionally. So the consideration is, hi, the consideration is building from that. And rather than specifically focusing on the census and that as the issue, doing it as enrollment, just petitioning people, the direct people on the ground, people at home. By that I mean ordinary folk, to like sign up, be like, yo, I'm mixed, and have like a registration form or whatever, just like people register for becoming a voter or whatever, register for being Mélanger, and we setting the criteria for what that registration is, what the information is, what the requirement is, and as much as I'm concerned, the requirement is just basically somebody identifying as mixed. That's the qualification at that point. Because if you get any further stringent, it's like, how are you going to prove it? What's the criteria? What's the oversight for that? So it's a matter of, if somebody identifies as being mixed, the thing is, what motivation do they have for like faking the funk? And even if they do fake the funk and identify accordingly, yo, that's part of the experience of being mixed. If a cat is being down, at the moment, in terms of having casino money or coffers or stuff like that, there's less motivation for fraud along those lines. There's increased necessity or benefit in having people sign up. So, and we don't have to worry about the credibility factor of other communities or the U.S. or the United Nations or international community, because they're not giving credibility to recognition as it is at the moment. So why worry about being criticized for any perceived illegitimacy or lax protocols when signing people up? Because whatever it is, it's further than what's going on at the moment. So the consideration is registering people to be a mixed, to be just recognized as Mélanger, having mixed heritage, and in my estimation, it should include things like address or phone number or email address or contact, or something like legit, like they're putting something on the giving some information about it. So it's not just like there is some kind of like credibility within that, but maybe some other information, like, if optional. All right, I got the first warning about the storage, so I'm going to be mindful of this. Oh, we're at this for an hour. Wowzers. Gots to roll. So, anyways, additional information, optional. A lot of information to be optional, like, what is the heritage? What is your mixed heritage? It can include fill in the blank, and then include additional check off. All right. Hey, all right. It can be a tick the box, and it can also be in fill in the blank, and it can be multiple categories and additionally. So, but then it can be additional information like occupation, just like the information that's done on the census. Occupation, income, education level, health status, in addition, like information that we need. So it can be like just one page, not a lot. Take maybe 15 minutes to complete, but like very valuable information in organizing, but also in lobbying governments, local governments, national governments, the United Nations government, about here's what our community is. This is what the information that we got on our own, without your help, directly, sufficiently, proficiently, and here's why the United Nations, and the United States, and our local government, for us here in the Cuyahoga area, it's Cuyahoga County, and all the municipalities herein and they're out meaning outside of Cuyahoga, county. This is why you need to be helping us. This is why you need to be supporting us, because that's what's up. So, anyways, that's a thought from the stories today, and that's a wrap for today, for the week, for the 40, 45. There it is. Namaste, assalamu alaikum, shalom, 再见, adios, stay checkers, esa bina asabawo, kill it with Fred. One love and peace.